December 11th, 1978. While Andy Warhol and Bianca Jagger were dancing at Studio 54 in Midtown Manhattan, 6 men in ski masks walked into Building 261 at John F. Kennedy Airport in Queens. 64 minutes later, they drove away with $5 million in cash and $875,000 in jewelry, the biggest cash robbery in American history. The crew celebrated that night at Roberts Lounge on Lefferts Boulevard in South Ozone Park. Champagne flowed. Everyone was getting rich. 1 week later, Parnell Edwards was found dead in his apartment on Liberty Avenue in Brooklyn, shot 6 times in the back of the head. Then Marty Krugman disappeared in January. Joe Manry and Robert McMahon turned up dead in a car crusher in May. Louis and Joanna Kafora vanished in March. Teresa Ferrara's body washed up in New Jersey. By summer 1979, at least 9 people connected to the heist were dead. Not from the FBI, from the man who planned it, Jimmy Burke, the same man who brought them in, the same man who promised them their share. Goodfellas showed you the robbery, but Martin Scorsese compressed 6 months of systematic murder into a few montage scenes. This is the real story of the Lufthansa Purge. Jimmy Burke grew up in foster homes across Hell's Kitchen and the Bronx during the Great Depression. By the time World War II ended, he was already running with street crews in Queens. They called him Jimmy the Gent because he would tip bartenders $50 bills at the Bamboo Lounge on Queens Boulevard. He would buy drinks for entire rooms. In a world of paranoid gangsters, Jimmy seemed different, generous, loyal. But by 1978, Jimmy was suspected in at least 32 murders. Bodies in car trunks abandoned in Canarsie, bodies dumped in the Jamaica Bay marshlands near Kennedy Airport, bodies that were never found. Jimmy ran Roberts Lounge, a dive bar in South Ozone Park that was really headquarters for hijackings and cargo theft. The guys who worked with Jimmy made their living robbing trucks from JFK Airport. It was a neighborhood industry. Jimmy answered to Paul Vario, a Lucchese crime family capo, who ran operations from a cab stand on Pitkin Avenue in Brooklyn. Vario had just lost a cocaine shipment and needed cash fast. That's when Marty Krugman walked in with the tip. Marty ran a wig shop and bookmaking operation in East New York. He wasn't connected. He was just a businessman who knew a Lufthansa cargo worker named Louis Werner. Werner had gambling debts. He owed Krugman $20,000, but Werner knew something valuable. Once a month, Lufthansa flew millions in untraceable cash from West Germany to Kennedy Airport. American servicemen and tourists exchanged dollars for Deutsche Marks, and Lufthansa flew those dollars back. The money sat in a vault at Building 261 over weekends before being deposited Monday morning. Werner couldn't pay his debt, but he could provide building layouts, security schedules, and vault combinations, everything needed for the robbery. Krugman brought it to Henry Hill, who took it to Jimmy Burke, and Jimmy realized this was generational wealth. Jimmy assembled his crew at Roberts Lounge in fall 1978. He recruited Tommy DeSimone, a volatile enforcer known as Two-Gun Tommy for his pearl-handled pistols. Joe Budamonri and Robert Frenchie McMahon were experienced airport robbers. Angelo Sipe, Paolo Licastri, and Louis Kafora were also part of the group. Parnell Stacks Edwards, a small-time criminal who played jazz guitar, would drive the getaway van. Jimmy promised everyone their cut. Marty Krugman would get $500,000. The robbers would split the rest. At 3:12 in the morning on December 11th, a black Ford Econoline van pulled up to the Lufthansa terminal. It was the same airport where the Beatles had landed in 1964 and where Vietnam War protests shut down terminals in the early 70s. 6 masked men entered. They zip-tied 9 employees. They forced the supervisor to open the vault. Inside was more cash than any of them had ever seen. They loaded it all. The operation took 64 minutes. By sunrise, they were gone. They drove to a warehouse in Canarsie owned by John Gotti, then a Gambino crime family captain. Burke transferred the cash into 2 cars and drove off. The money was stashed at his mother-in-law's house in Howard Beach. And that's when Stax Edwards made his fatal mistake. Stax was supposed to drive the van to a New Jersey junkyard controlled by Gotti. The van was supposed to be crushed. Instead, Stax drove to his girlfriend's apartment on Liberty Avenue, got high, and passed out. The van was parked next to a fire hydrant. 2 days later, December 13th, while New York prepared for Christmas and Studio 54 was days away from its IRS raid, a cop ran the plates. Stolen. The van matched the robbery description. Inside were fingerprints. The FBI had Stax's name within 3 days, and once they had Stax, they had Jimmy Burke and his entire crew. Jimmy heard about the van on December 13th. He made a decision. December 18th. 1 week after the heist, Tommy DeSimone and Angelo Sipe walked into Stax's apartment. Stax was on his couch, probably high, probably thinking he would lay low. Tommy shot him 6 times in the back of the head. The New York Police Department found Stax the next day. His apartment reeked of marijuana. Jazz records were scattered everywhere. Stax Edwards became the first casualty of the Lufthansa Purge. But Jimmy wasn't just killing Stax because of the van. Stax was supposed to get $60,000. Now that money stayed with Jimmy, and every person dead meant one less FBI witness, Jimmy realized something. If he could kill one, he could kill them all. Marty Krugman was getting nervous. He was supposed to get $500,000. But weeks passed. Christmas came and went. New Year's Eve at Studio 54 brought the club its biggest single night profit of $190,000. And Jimmy kept telling Marty to wait. But Marty couldn't shut up. He kept showing up at Robert's lounge, demanding his money. He kept calling, and every time Jimmy's face got colder. January 6th, 1979, Marty Krugman disappeared. His wife reported him missing. Brooklyn detectives investigated. No body, no evidence. Years later, informants claimed Jimmy Burke and Tommy DeSimone tortured Marty at a house in Queens before killing him. They dismembered his body and buried the pieces across Brooklyn. Marty's remains have never been found. $500,000 stayed with Jimmy. On January 14th, Tommy DeSimone disappeared. But Tommy wasn't killed by Jimmy. The Gambino family murdered him in retaliation for killing 2 made men without permission. John Gotti himself ordered it. Tommy's wife, Cookie, reported him missing. His body was never found. In March, Louis Cafora made a mistake. Jimmy told everyone not to make big purchases. But Louis bought his wife, Joanna, a custom pink Cadillac. Then he drove it near Kennedy Airport, where FBI agents were investigating. Louis realized his mistake. He tried to become an FBI informant, but before he could, both Louis and Joanna disappeared. According to Henry Hill, Jimmy had them killed and their bodies compacted with their pink Cadillac at a Brooklyn salvage yard. Louis and Joanna Cafora were never found. May 1979. Joe Budamonri and Robert Frenchie McMahon were 2 of the actual robbers inside the terminal, holding workers at gunpoint. They deserved their cuts. Their bodies were found in a crushed car at a scrapyard in East New York. Both were shot multiple times. The message was clear: talk and you end up in a car crusher. Teresa Ferrara ran a beauty salon in Brooklyn. She was a Burke associate. She heard things. Apparently, she heard too much about what happened to Marty Krugman. Her body was found in a car trunk near Kennedy Airport in May. She had been strangled. By summer 1979, while Jimmy Carter's chief of staff was being accused of using cocaine at Studio 54, and the club's owners were pleading guilty to tax evasion, at least 9 people connected to Lufthansa were dead or missing. The FBI knew who was responsible. But knowing and proving are different things. Here is what made Jimmy Burke terrifying. He was not paranoid or out of control. He was calm and calculated. This was the same man who had been buying drinks for these people at Robert's Lounge months earlier, who had planned the heist with them, who had promised them their cuts. He was known as Jimmy the Gent because he was so generous. Then he systematically murdered them. Henry Hill had worked with Jimmy since he was a teenager in the 50s. He knew Jimmy better than anyone, and he watched it all happen. Stacks was killed. Marty disappeared. Bodies piled up across Brooklyn and Queens through spring 1979. Henry realized something. No matter how loyal you were to Jimmy Burke, if you became a liability, you were dead. Loyalty meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was Jimmy Burke's survival. In 1980, Henry was arrested for drug trafficking. He knew he was next. If he went to prison, Jimmy would have him killed inside. If he stayed out, Jimmy would kill him on the street. So Henry did something almost unthinkable. He flipped. He became a federal witness. He gave the FBI everything. Every murder, every hijacking, every robbery. He gave them Paul Vario. He gave them the Boston College basketball point shaving scandal Jimmy had fixed. He gave them the Lufthansa heist. He gave them Jimmy Burke. Jimmy Burke was arrested, but not for Lufthansa, not for the 9 murders. The FBI never got enough evidence because all the witnesses were dead. They got him for fixing basketball games and an unrelated murder. In 1982, Jimmy was convicted and sentenced to 12 years. While in prison, he was convicted of murdering drug dealer Richard Eaton. He was sentenced to 20 years to life. Jimmy died in prison on April 13, 1996, from lung cancer at Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo. He was 64, 12 years before parole eligibility. He maintained until death he had nothing to do with the Lufthansa murders. Louis Werner, the inside man, was the only person convicted for the heist itself. He was sentenced to 15 years in May 1979. He served his time. Werner died in 2020. Henry Hill entered witness protection. He wrote Wise Guy with Nicholas Pileggi, which became Goodfellas in 1990. Henry died in 2012 in Los Angeles. He was 69. The Lufthansa money was never recovered. $5,875,000 vanished. Some went to Paul Vario and the Lucchese family, some to John Gotti and the Gambinos, some to corrupt cops. Most of it probably stayed with Jimmy Burke. Hidden in safe deposit boxes, buried in backyards across Queens, laundered through businesses investigators never found. The Lufthansa heist should have been perfect. $5 million, a clean getaway. No shots fired during the robbery. Split the money. Lay low. Live like kings. But Jimmy Burke's greed turned the biggest cash robbery in American history into a massacre. He killed his own crew, the people who trusted him, the people who made him rich, and he died in prison anyway. Not because the FBI caught him with the money, because Henry Hill realized staying loyal to Jimmy Burke was a death sentence. Henry said years later that Jimmy was the most dangerous man he ever knew. Not because he was violent. Jimmy was dangerous because he could plan your murder while buying you a drink. He could smile at you Tuesday at Robert's Lounge and have you killed Wednesday. That was James Jimmy the Gent Burke, the man who pulled off the heist of the century and then systematically murdered everyone who helped him do it. 9 people dead in 6 months, all to keep $5 million and avoid prosecution. The Lufthansa Purge was not just mob hits. It was a masterclass in how greed destroys everything. Jimmy could have split the money, kept everyone quiet with their cuts, retired rich. Instead, he left a trail of bodies across Brooklyn and Queens and died in a Buffalo prison cell. The Lufthansa Purge shows how quickly greed turns allies into targets. Jimmy Burke did not need to kill his crew. He chose to. And that choice defines his legacy just as much as the robbery itself. Subscribe for more true stories from inside the American Mafia.